All right, yeah. Today I thought I could do. Hopefully, I can put this on the no original channel as well. But yeah, I found two interviews I want to do of not of Chris, but this one is Chris. Chris Cornell, rare interview about depression and drugs. I might have to block this out. Hopefully, I don't, but we will see. But yeah, let's go.
I guess the overall attitude kind of ends up being um, that it's a drug issue, but that's kind of cloudy. I mean, I have other friends that were extremely talented musicians that died in other ways, and I think it's just sort of
Why did some guys make it and some guys didn't make it?
well, everybody has friends from school that would be the same age as them that aren't there. People die. People don't survive.
Sure. Is it
that kind of
is
that
it
simple? If you go into a 12-step meeting, any city, and you count 75 people and you ask how many of them are musicians, you're going to get 2. And everybody else is going to be from every walk of life that you can imagine. The same as Scott Weiland's mother crying. There are mothers crying who have lost their sons, who are construction workers, mechanics, literally anything you can think of, and it's happening every day. And the only difference between a musician that's famous and that other kid is that we don't talk about him on the radio.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. One of the things that I've experienced over and over again, which I think is a way that people deal with it, particularly when it's someone who's already kind of celebrated for something, is that we invent this idea that somehow there was like it was predetermined. I think. And that's where I get impatient with it, because it's if that's the case, it's predetermined with every kid that ends up with a substance abuse habit and dies from it.
But you can't change your
millions
path,
of them. Yeah, you can, absolutely.
And you just have to surround yourself
And
with
many
the right
do,
people.
and many don't. If someone has a propensity to abuse alcohol or drugs, and they didn't meet the wrong sort this weekend, they're going to meet another guy somewhere else.
At some point.
Yeah, if you have that in you.
Do you ever
It's
look
a
at...
matter of sort of course as to when, at what point in your life you run into it and realize, and then you have to confront the problem. I was never decadent, and I was always someone I think that was
In control?
I was always sort of I was used to a certain amount of just kind of expecting a lot of myself and being able to meet that expectation of myself, not of anybody else. And I kind of, that was who I was since I could remember.
Right.
It's a sad thing for anybody.
For anybody. Absolutely.
In their bed at home,
Absolutely.
in a parking lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that if there's any sort of anything to learn from it, it's that there is no type of person, vocation. There is no categorization of person, man or woman that you can be that is going to be immune to a lot of these things: substance abuse, mental illness, behavioral problems. Can affect anybody and everybody. No one's immune to it, even the ones that you would think should have more help and support, maybe. But I don't know. I don't think that. I don't think that at the end of the day, if a person really wants to get better, anything can stop them, and if a person doesn't want to, they won't. You can make them do it.
Yeah, there was a lot of big things he kind of brought up in that. I think that's very true. There's well, it's not really a saying, but a thing in this country that, especially in this country, everybody at some point drinks. I don't drink, but still, no matter where I go, people that know I don't drink want to drink. If everyone's drinking, it's just something that people do here. But I don't drink. Like, not, I've never been alcohol. I just never really liked drinking. Um, yeah. So, but everybody at some point in their life, like say if you've never tried drugs, everybody at some point in their life tries a drink. Only 10% of the population become alcoholics, and there's no real. You either have addictive personality or not. But people can have addictive, like he said, that you can have you can have an addictive personality with things that aren't so obviously self-destructive, like drugs or alcohol. Um, because you see people that get into sport and they don't just get into a sport, they get into a sport, and whether it's take fishing, even something like fishing. They don't just go out and buy a fishing. They want to buy every bit of everything they can possibly buy to do with all the top of like gambling. Again, another addiction that is like kind of socially acceptable until it isn't. That's what I find with drinking, especially in this country. Like we have such a drinking culture still. Like it is the thing to do here, but like people people are willing to not necessarily push someone, because people don't think they're pushing someone, but you're going to offer someone a drink, keep offering them a drink, but then the second that you realize it's a problem, you're going to go, whoa, you got a problem. And it's like, well, but it's so socially accepted, and like, yeah. But he's absolutely right. There's plenty of people from all walks of life. It's got nothing to do with your background. I mean, how many times do you see? I mean, a big thing is childhood stars. How many childhood stars end up dead or crazy on drugs, basically? And now you would think, now what? Why would that be? They've had a lovely life since they was a kid. They've been what everybody wants, famous, but yet they end up destroying themselves through drugs. Musicians, although I do think in when you're in the create, something Nick Cave says in his book about, and I thought it was so true, and I found it when I was like in that mind space of trying to write. Um, it's a very depressing mind space to be in the creative mind space, because nobody believes in you. Nobody believes that you can do it, and it's not their job to believe in you either. But yeah, when you're in a creative space, like and you want to create, you've you battle with nobody actually really believing in you. Nobody's really going to support you. Um, and a constant feeling that you're not as good as you think you are, or that you know you could be. So it's a constant kind of negative space, but that's the place that the best creative stuff comes from. It just this, and it's something Russell Brand said, like even if you take Russell Brand takes it away from the creative space and puts it like even into something like the sports world, like George Best or Paul Gascoigne, two English football players. Um, well, George Best, I think, yeah, no, he's English. I think he's from, I don't know actually, but he's from Britain anyway, somewhere in Britain. I'm sure he's from Manchester. But anyway, um, you take them two examples. Now, these are two men that are just naturally gifted at playing football, like our football, proper football. They're naturally gifted at playing football. You can't then become a manager because, say, if you're like Paul Gascoigne and you just have this natural flair, natural touch with the ball, um, how do you really teach that to someone else? Because the only way you can teach them is to say, well, be Paul Gascoigne. Because you don't really know what that is that's making you do these things. You just do it. It's not an over practiced thing that you're doing. You just have a natural gift for something. But both of them people, once they kind of outlived their talent, they both become alcoholics, drug addicts, just become absolute like just lost the plot. Like to be honest. And something Russell Brand says that true genius, in no matter what space you put it in, true genius can only come through a fragile structure. It's why, like businessmen, if you take a businessman, businessmen are arguably more what's the word, capable to to live in this society more than a creative person, because you can be a good business person and you can go and join a company, start a company, blah 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 blah. If you're a musician or an artist, it's not as easy to find a place where to monetize it. But if you take a businessman, it's very very rare. I mean, I couldn't tell you one businessman that actually is crazy creative. You kind of give that up when you become a strong um, thing. So I think Russell Brand has a great point that true genius, like artistic genius, comes through a fragile structure, the fragile human. Like it just seems to seep out of fragile people more than a kind of more strong-minded um, person. But yeah, I think as well what he said is right. It don't matter what background you come from. It don't matter really anything. Like if you become, you see it with like kids of billionaires, they become drug addicts. Now, why? Their life is fine, and yeah, and Chris Cornell's right that you just don't care about the kid who's becomes a heroin addict that isn't famous. Basically, that you seem to think it's more musicians because it's there in your face basically, and when they do overdose and die, it's going to be everywhere. But like you said, there's just as many people that are working on a building site that are killing themselves with drugs, or homeless, or like you said, sat in their bed, like not doing anything, just gonna, yeah. People are very, very complex. It's not quite easy to just draw a, like, I don't, yeah, nothing is black and white with humans or with anything, to be fair, but definitely not humans. Humans are way too complicated creatures, and you don't really know. Each is its own individual slice of insanity, really. But yeah, yeah, no, I think he made good, some great points in this. But then on the other side, I do think that putting your mind in that space of being a creative person, it's a lonely road in itself. People don't believe in you until you give them no other choice but to. Like, who is it that said? Who's the singer that said? I think it might have actually been Noel Gallagher. They said no one took them serious, like in their family, until they was on top of the pops. And he's like, top of the pops in them days was the sign that, all right, if you're on top of the pops, you definitely got to be doing something, right? But you hear that quite a lot with people, that people's parents or whatever, they don't support them when they're in that creative world um, throughout most of it, until they get them to a point where, until you get to a point where you're undeniable. And and then it's like, well, you've done it. But yeah, it's a lonely place, I think, being a musician. Yeah, and it's a very, yeah, depressing place, I think too. But also, I do think there's something about Seattle, because Seattle is crazy. Like I don't think, mind you saying that, there's a lot of people that have died in other genres, but it does seem to be every, like literally every band that popped up. At least every band from this, again, I suppose it's the same thing, but every band from the Seattle scene that kind of made it had it. I think maybe, mind you, Eddie Vedder's not actually from there, is he? And Eddie Vedder's got his own problems. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, when you're talking about your Chris Cornells and your Mark Lanagans and um, Kurt Cobain and Lane State, I mean, like literally all them big names had some type of drug problem, killed them. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. Like something going on in Seattle. Yeah. But I could literally listen to Chris talk about anything, to be fair. And when he said as well that come up in the book about him not being decadent, and that comes up straight away with Soundgarden, that they weren't the band that, you know, everyone. Well, they was obviously doing drugs, but they weren't that band that was. They weren't Motley Crue, put it that way. Like it wasn't about the partying lifestyle. They weren't really about that. Like, yeah, that's something that you get from his book. That they would rather sit there and talk about philosophy or something. Do you know what I mean? Which, to be honest, I kind of can relate to that. But yeah, yeah. That's another thing I was going to say is, like he said as well, that the depress that drugs leads to depression. But I had a mate saying to me, "Is it that like people say, like say, smoking weed makes you depressed?" And he's like, "Well, is that the case, or is it that depressed people smoke weed? Is what's the chicken and the egg of it?" And I do think there's multiple reasons to why you can be depressed. I do think there is a chemical um, element, like a chemical in your brain, like a chemical imbalance. I do think that. I do think that sometimes it can just be, how are you actually looking after yourself? Are you exercising? Are you washing and things like that? Personal, like, yeah, care. Then things like your actual situation you're in life. If you're working a shitty job and you're like gonna be more, yeah, depressed if your situation is not right for you that you're actually in. But then all of them things is, it's yeah, like I say, it's a real cocktail of, it could be anything when people have that kind of depression and anxiety and yeah. But yeah, that's the reaction.